Urska Rubin. I enjoyed this conversation so much. She's from Slovenia, and she has a podcast, and she listens, and she asks great questions. All too often, unfortunately, we hear that people just aren't good listeners. But she interviews from such a wide variety. Taliban, racism, narcissism, gender identity. She has a great thirst for curiosity. In fact, that's the first question I ask her is, why is she so curious? And she is just refreshing and so direct and so logical and so just the way she approaches so many things that she does is very refreshing. She has a great podcast episode on the Mexican cartels where she discovers many things, and she's not locked into a particular uh, narrative. She is very open, and you could tell that when people are bringing her information, telling her this, and you could tell, and she just grasps it. The one that she talks with somebody in who uh, has different pronouns, right? And just she didn't quite understand the approach, and it was just explained well by her guests. It's just a great podcaster. She's only been doing it for about a half year. I hope she continues it, but she's fantastic. Urska Rubin from Slovenia. Her podcast is Captainese. You're going to really enjoy this conversation. I certainly did. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission: how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family, in their passion, in their careers, and how it helped them. Our podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration.
Urska, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Why are you so curious?
Oh, you're talking about my podcast. Well, you
Talking about
see,
you. Yeah.
the thing is that it's not hard to be curious when you have no life, because I am sort of a no-lifer, and I live
Yeah.
in Slovenia. For everyone, this is a place where not a lot of things are really happening, and there's the USA, which is most of my guests are from the USA, and you guys are very interesting. You guys are so interesting to observe. The political sphere, the whole woke movement now. You guys are so interesting. So yeah, you Americans, you are the reason I'm curious. Like, nothing's happening here. I don't have a lot of friends, and then there's social media, and I see everything happening, and I'm like, well, got to start a podcast. And I'm a very curious person. I read a lot of books. I would say I read about 6 books a month, something like that.
Wow. Wow. You define yourself as 27-year-old self-employed asocial personality who could spend 1 year with no social contact. That can't be the case. You have to speak to somebody, no?
That can definitely be the case. I want to
Wow.
I want to point out something, not antisocial, because some people reached out and
Ah,
they were like, "You are antisocial, so do you have psychopathic tendencies?" And I'm like, "No, no, no. Antisocial is when you want to hurt people. I do like
right.
people. I just don't want them around me." Now, that's asocial, right? So I probably could do that, although during the pandemic, I was okay for 3 months because I didn't see nobody, like at all. And then the fourth month, I was actually thinking, hey, maybe I want to talk to a human for once. So that was pretty much a record. Although I could pull off 1 year with no problem. Like if needed, no problem.
So perhaps you use the podcast to communicate with people. You just don't want them to be physically around you.
That's a very good way of putting it. Yes.
Hmm. Very, very interesting. And have you always been this way?
Well, I've been addicted to video games and I was playing about 23 hours a day at my lowest
Whoa.
point. Yeah, definitely not proud of it. No, not
Oh,
something you
whoa.
want to put on your
Oh,
resume,
no.
that's for sure.
No.
So I feel like that kind of took away the social, the whole social life for me. And then after that, I just continued. But even before that, I was always very introverted, and I always kept to myself. I like to go out alone. One of those weirdos that go to bars alone and just observe the whole scene. That's me.
Not
That
weird. They're
that
not weird.
that is totally me. They're
Is
not
it?
weird. I know, but some people think it's weird. So
Yeah.
I was always the observer, introverted type that likes to. I just like to observe people. I don't want to deal with them necessarily.
And that I think that's evident in the great conversations you have. Going back to video games, is video game addiction, should that be treated like any other addiction?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a good reason why video game addiction actually happens nowadays because we have a society where everyone gets a trophy, right? We have the
Mm.
participation trophy type of society. And teenagers, especially young men, we need competitions. Humans are competitive creatures, whether you like it or not. So if you don't have to put in any effort at school or at workplace or whatever, and you just get a trophy for nothing, you're not really going to appreciate that. You need something. And when it comes to video games, if you don't put in the time and the effort, and if you don't show some sort of a skill, you're not getting to the next level. Like you're just not. So that's real competition. And that's why people get hooked on that, because that's something that they need. They're not getting it at school or at workplace. So if we just, I believe that if we just embraced the community a little bit and start incorporating the fact that there is such thing as competition and that humans need it, I think we would decrease the amount of people that are addicted to video games.
Well, here in the US, there's, gamers that make money. There's scholarships being awarded. There's big events. I mean, it's an actual industry now. Not that everybody can make it. There's a professional, industry for it. But as myself, I played video games as a kid, and I just know that if I started playing some of them, I wouldn't see the light of day. I know that's something that it just hooks you in. It just brings you in. I just try to push it away, I guess. But it's very interesting how you have this one podcast where you talk to this young man, well, the gentleman anyway. I think he's from Australia, where you talk about dating and you talk about meeting people, and at one point you talk about incels, and the dangers there. But I'm not saying video game attributes it or is a part of it or to blame, but perhaps it's just part of the puzzle. What do we do? How do we help these people that have this addiction?
That's a very good question. And I think that the problem is actually a lot more complicated than we would like to believe. In a
Mm.
way, these people need to take actions to their own hands. Like, if you are a teenager or especially an adult, you cannot just complain about society. You have to do something about it, you yourself, just like I did. But what would be beneficial would be to really, I feel like men nowadays are kind of left without purpose, because if you look at in the past, men went to war, and yes, it was the fact that they were kind of more disposable than women, but they had a purpose nevertheless. And now I see a lot of men just being purposeless. And video games and competing there gives you sort of a purpose. So I think that what we need to do is we just need to uplift our young men more, and we need to tell them, look, it's okay if you want to be competitive, it's okay if you want to get somewhere in life, right? And what we're doing is we're basically just telling them that they are useless, that women are independent, and that women do not need them. Where we are, I feel like we are pushing men down. And if that stops somehow, I don't know how, but if we work on it, I think the incel community would start shrinking really rapidly.
Do you see that as a local problem to Slovenia or more worldwide? Where do you see that manifested?
Not as much here. I wouldn't say that is the case in Slovenia, but in the US, I would say so based on my
Mm.
observations. Yeah.
Hmm. What do we need to know? What should we know about Slovenia? Only 2 million in population, and what do we need? Former Yugoslavia. What should we know about it here in the West?
Okay, so what you should know is that it's a beautiful country to retire in. As I said before,
Mm.
there's nothing happening, so you have to keep that in mind. It's not a party place, but it's very safe. It is extremely safe. And it's actually, I think it's top 10 safest places in the world. And then
Wow.
it's very green, and people claim to speak English, but they really don't. I mean, they do, but they have such a strong accent that you don't understand anything we say. I'm doing okay, but so it's a perfect place to retire if you want to see, if you want to be safe, and if you want to see some nature, feel free to visit.
Your English is excellent. So you're saying that a lot of the population doesn't speak that well?
No, definitely not. No, I'm an exception to the rule.
And why is that?
Well, I watched a lot of American movies, a lot of American TV shows.
Uh,
I love them and I read a
that's
lot. And then this podcast also helps because I
mm.
mostly talk to Canadians and Americans. So, yeah.
Very, very interesting. Before you mentioned, you made a really good point about how men, since they had purpose because they went to war. I mean, let's talk about that. I know you talk about, you talk to a couple of your podcasts you dedicate to Putin and Joe Stalin. That one was really, really interesting too. What are your feelings now? We're in the dead of winter. The war is still going on in Ukraine and Russia. What are your feelings on that, being south of that and kind of close, certainly closer than we are?
Yeah, it's like Slovenia, especially. I feel like we are very lucky because no immigrant really wants to enter Slovenia. They
Really?
all want to go to Austria because there's a lot more opportunity up there. We're pretty much like nowhere. Like, we're like Narnia, Hogwarts, whatever you want to call it, right? No one really wants to enter, which is great because we do not want anybody to enter. I said
Yeah.
that like this is the opinion of the majority of people in my country. Not necessarily my opinion, but I've pointed it out and I've been called a Nazi because of that for whatever reason. We do not like immigrants. um, we feel like it is a different culture. They do not mix with us. And if we have a certain quota of people that we like to let in the country if they assimilate, but we are not too excited about letting people in, especially if we have poverty issue going on in this country. Like, you do not let other people in your house while you still have hungry children, right? And I said that it's not only up until there's milk and honey in your country that you start letting other people in. So this is our perception of immigrants. We like them. We just do not want to receive a lot of immigrants in our country. That is, I know it's very controversial to say, but this is the consensus of Slovenians. And how we see it is, well, they don't want to be here anyway. They're going to Austria, so let's transit them to north.
Now, just south of you is Croatia, and there's certainly a lot of there's a lot of Croatians actually go to Italy, but and is there a similar attitude as far as immigrants?
Croatians. I'm not sure about Croatians. There is a very similar attitude with Hungarians.
Mm.
Austrians are always welcoming, of course, because they need a lot of workers, and Slovenians also go to Austria to work. But Croatians, I'm not really sure. I don't really care. I don't think Croatians really care that much either.
Fascinating. It's
Yeah.
fascinating that whole area of Europe. My father's Italian. I spent a lot of my youth there, summers there, but in Switzerland as well. We didn't really venture out east. We would always go west, to France and to Spain. I'm always fascinated with the dynamic of the different countries there. And as again about the Afghanistan, excuse me, Afghanistan, which is another topic which you talk about the Taliban, which is great. The Ukraine and Russia. What are you're hoping, of course, that it comes to an end. What is the consensus of the Slovenians about the war?
What we would like to see, okay, so we don't believe that just removing Putin would all of a sudden make everything better. It would help, but it would probably be just an era where another strong leader comes on the top and then we see the same thing all over again. I think the best solution here is to get Russia to have a better institutional system, right? And to give their leaders less power. Now, there is a problem here because Russians do like their leaders in general. Like, Russians want a leader who is strong, they want an authoritarian leader. They do not like a nice guy. They need a leader who may be wrong sometimes, but is a leader nevertheless. Because I was watching, so that is the biggest problem here because Russians want to change. Well, I mean, the youth maybe in Russia wants to change, but there's a lot of Russians who really don't, and they like Putin. I've watched interviews from Russians before the election. I mean, everyone knew that Putin was going to win, but they were telling Russians what Putin did, what Putin said. No matter what they told Russians, the answer was "Ja za Putina," which means "I am for Putin. I'm going to vote for Putin." They didn't care what they told them. So, it's propaganda is to democracy what violence is to dictatorship. And that is a problem. That is a huge problem because when you have a consensus of people in a country and it's a cultural issue, it's going to be very hard to eradicate it.
Propaganda to democracy is, what was the second part of your quote there? It's just as dangerous as
It's the same as violence and dictatorship.
violence and dictatorship.
The result
Yeah,
is the same, right? If you feed people propaganda, I mean, it's the same as if you use violence.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Our country here in the West is full of propaganda, but certainly not the same. It's more kind of capitalistic here, and would you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And there in Slovenia, it's a full democracy, and how are there many political parties?
I would say the whole political sphere is okay. The problem is that we're moving more and more to the left, but that's the whole
Mm.
world, right? But I feel like compared to other countries, we're doing okay. We're doing okay. I feel like we are very vocal as a society because we've been through so many wars, so many people try to occupy us. We are very sensitive to that. So no matter what someone tries to do, we're like, no, don't do that, don't do that. This is how we do it. Do not change anything. So
Interesting.
whenever we have a government that's trying to change something or trying to incorporate some reform, there's a lot of protests around. We protest a lot. I feel like we have more control over our politicians than other countries.
Hmm. And
But
why
it's
is
not
that?
propaganda free. It is not propaganda free. Well,
Of
I
course.
think the first thing is that it's a small country. And the second thing is that we've been put down in the past. So we became very vocal.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because I feel like the biggest problem in a lot of countries where the political sphere is where it is right now is because people didn't speak enough soon enough, right?
Hmm.
It's kind of like, so there was one change made and nobody said anything, and then they pushed the limit a little bit, and then they pushed it again, and it's sort of like I always use a metaphor of, how they boil frogs. They don't throw them in the boiled water, they throw them in the cold water, and then they increase the temperature little by little until it is basically boiled water, and the frog does not notice, and before you know it, the frog is boiled, and there you go, you can serve a frog. So I feel like this is what's happening in a lot of countries. This is what we saw during the pandemic with all the restrictions with COVID. I would have never thought we were going to have to walk around with a mask on and not enter any place and not see people and not drink alcohol and not go to another city. But before I knew it, that was the case because nobody spoke up. We were too afraid.
Very interesting. And that was excuse me, and that was the case there? How did Slovenia handle the pandemic? You thought it was too radical?
We thought, well, at the beginning we didn't even know what to expect, right?
Right,
this is
nobody did,
this is the
yeah.
first time a lot of us are experiencing any type of pandemic. We were confused. We thought it was worse than it actually is, and then we just went along with what the government said. And again, before you know it, you are so limited that you just don't know where to start protesting.
Yeah, and, certain governments took advantage of that. What can we really make our public do, you know? And, that certainly, I believe, was the case here. Uh, you know, it's just we've learned so much. We've learned so much from that. So you decide to do this podcast, and you I mean, you've been doing it for about 4 or 5 months, is that correct?
Yeah, something about that. Yeah, four
Yeah,
and a
and,
half. Yeah.
about
Hmm.
4.5 months, yeah, I went back, and it's not light content. I guess some of it is, but I mean, it's not your style. I'm certainly getting the, you're it's not your style to kinda be light, Urska. I mean, you're determined, you wanna get to the controversial things, and that's very admirable. I want you to continue. I hope you do.
Someone has to do it, right? Someone has to do it. But I would also love to just come on air and just talk and have
Yeah,
fun and
yeah,
joke around and stuff. So I have these Friday episodes sometimes, where I basically bring on just random people and we just talk, to kind of
I
like
say.
fulfill that need. But other than that, my content is not too family friendly. No.
Right, right. Well, it's certainly yeah, family friendly. So let's just we'll talk about the binary, right? You talk to the uh to the person who identifies as they, and and you open up by saying, before we get in a big argument here, I or you didn't say argument before disagreement, I forgot what you said, but and they were very open and say, we're not going to get an argument, we're just going to have an open conversation. So I think some of the topics may not be family friendly, but you do a great job of listening and presenting your case. And I've seen you kind of pivot. I've seen you have moments of like, well, I thought this, and now this is a very interesting point. I'm going to reflect a little bit. That's unique, Urska. That's unique.
Yeah, and it's pretty much the only way to learn because I feel
Right.
like if I have a conversation where I'm the only one talking and I just have this bias towards my opinion and I'm trying to win, then after 1 hour and a half of conversation, I learned nothing. So listening is it's pretty much the only, it's the only way to go if you really want to have an honest conversation. In an honest conversation, you have to be vulnerable to a degree. You must not want to win because then this is just a no-go from the get-go.
An argument versus a discussion. It seems to me that an argument, there needs to be a winner and a loser. With a discussion, you can go both ways. It's a give and take.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if our politicians, at one particular point, you do make that point. Our politicians perhaps should be listening to this.
I just had to. I mean, no politician is ever going to listen to my podcast, that's
You
for
never
sure. But
know.
if they
You
did,
never
maybe,
know.
maybe it would be beneficial. I don't know.
Yeah, and the win-win society, like you talked about before, where there's some people who just dig in. This is my opinion, and I'm digging in, and that's it. And uh, nobody gets anywhere that way. It's unfortunate, but I think podcasts like ours, where we talk to people that I would normally not, I can't imagine in a scenario where we would run into each other. Just I'm not in Europe that often. I know you do a certain amount of traveling, but through this medium, we're able to talk and exchange great ideas, and hopefully move forward ourselves and those that are listening. It's wonderful, don't you agree? That's why you do it. I'm assuming.
Absolutely. I just talked to a young boy from Iran who, well, it's illegal to report from Iran, so I'm not allowed to publish the episode quite yet. But
Whoa.
whoa, yeah, whoa is right. Yeah, and he told me a lot about the protests that were going on there. He told me that the prisoners now took over the role of the morality police and they're paying them minimum wage per day in order to go around and take hostages and to, punish them. So I heard a lot of things from him, and it's such a blessing and a privilege to be able to speak to a guy from Iran. He had to actually rent a whole house in order for him to do this interview. And he had a friend who was walking around and who was watching him to make sure that nobody is around, because if the morality police found out what he was doing, he would probably be taken away. And he said he would be killed at best. So and I am still waiting to publish that episode. When he gives me the green light, I'll do it. Actually, he has the recording because he wasn't comfortable enough to give it to me, obviously. So yeah, it's such a privilege to talk to people from all over the globe. Yeah.
Can't you, X out his face and modify the vocal or do anything like that? Obviously, it's his choice.
I could do that. However, I am comfortable with waiting for a month or
Of
months.
course, of course, of course. I I was at an event here in the States. This is before the World Cup, and I saw a young man in an Iran soccer jersey, football jersey, and I said, "Hey, are you excited? Actually, the U.S., we're actually playing Iran." And he kind of looked at me and said, "I can't celebrate, that. There's just what's going on in my country is, it's just too devastating. It's not something that, I can celebrate at all." And and I said, Iran is, it's the people are wonderful, but just the government is shit, and that's the
Mm.
case for many, many countries. It's, and he said that well, but he goes, but remember, you have it really good here in the United States. But, I said, what can we do to help? And he said, just keep on talking about it and keep on, bringing it up. And hopefully that'll help. It's just a horrible situation there.
Yeah, and the fact that they have access to the internet is what's helping them the most, because
Mm.
now young people can go online you see, having internet access is dangerous if you want to be a dictator. You don't want people to know what's
Mhm.
going on around the globe. That's what's going to bury you. And by the way, you talked about reputations of Americans and stuff. I figured when I was talking to a lot of people. I talked to someone from, well, I've talked to a person who was with people in Afghanistan, and I talked to that person from Iran, and now I'm talking to someone from North Korea. Well, a refugee, and even here in Slovenia, you guys, Americans, people generally actually like you. Nobody is talking about, oh, stupid Americans. No, we like you. Or we like you a lot more than a lot of you realize. We actually like
Mm.
Western culture. And I know there is this saying that, yeah, in North Korea they call Americans American bastards. Okay, but even people who, but if you go online and you do a little bit of research, you cannot still hate Americans. Like, you just cannot. Like, as people, we have a lot of respect for you, actually.
I 10 years old, my father, I think I mentioned him, my father's an Italian immigrant. The first day of summer, school was out. Summer, my father gave me a suitcase, brought me to the bus station, gave me a plane ticket. So you're going to meet your grandmother in Milan. So he sends me to Italy alone at 10, uh, which it would be illegal now. He'd probably be arrested. But, but I went over there and I looked around. I had a picture of my grandmother, my uncle, and I met them. And, so I would spend many summers there in Italy and in Switzerland. And just I mean, this is a while ago. I'm a 54-year-old man now, but the culture was always appreciated. Certainly, the culture was appreciated, the movies, the music, etc. But I found that, like, as a young male who was very much interested in women, the girls, and they were very interested in me taking them back to the U.S. So it was always a kind of I want to go back. I want to go. But as far as respect for Americans, I guess it just varies. Our foreign policy isn't the best, and it clashes with others. I wonder what the general consensus is of Americans and how other countries view them. There's good and bad. There's good and bad. I guess. Have you been to the States?
Oh yeah, I've been and I love it. I've been to New York 4 times, loved it. I've been to
Hmm.
LA, didn't like it as much, but New
Ah,
York, LA, you like one, you don't like the other, right?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I've been to, well, Vegas was nice. So, I think you guys have a little bit of division issue going on, but I think you'll be okay.
Division. It's a good way of putting it. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Politically, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Politically,
yeah,
of course.
yeah, yeah. There's only two parties here, and it most of the public lives in the middle, but the extremes get most of the press. So it's interesting. You said New York, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas. Boy, we talk about three different cultures. And the old saying here in the U.S. is, "Don't live in New York for too long; you'll get too hard. Don't live in California for too long; you'll get too soft."
I can see that happening.
You
Vegas,
know.
I do not remember because I was drunk for 7 days. So,
Yes, yes, I could see that happening. Yes, a lot of lights, a lot of. Are you a gambler?
not really. No, not
Yeah,
really. Mm-mm,
yeah,
no.
yeah. Las Vegas has its very own kind of culture there. It's very odd, all touristy. And are Slovenians welcome of not of immigrants is one thing, but tourists certainly. I would think they'd be very welcoming.
We are very welcoming of tourists, but
Yeah,
tourists do not want to come here. We just built this
really.
tourist train. As we built a tourist train that goes around the city. It's full of Japanese. I don't know why, but you can see it on their faces, the disappointment, because there's nothing to see. So we are welcoming, but you're not going to see anything.
You mentioned that in a video, how you see the
Yeah,
disappointed look of the tourists.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's, that is funny. So why do you stay?
That's a good question. You see, I stay because of the taxes. I pay
Ah,
4% tax on my income.
whoa.
Mhm.
And healthcare is included.
Healthcare? No, healthcare is not included. For okay, so
Ah,
if I give you like so okay, living expenses for $700 per month, you can get a very nice apartment. A very
uh,
nice one in the city. And then taxes is 4% of your income. And then you pay about $450 for all the insurance. So that's social security, the medical security, everything. So, I mean, like, income wise, it's really nice. And it's very
and
cheap to be here.
that's what it's. Yeah, university is that private?
Oh, that's all. Well, you can get a private university, but the public ones are very good. Very good.
Hmm.
And most people go to public ones. And of course, they're free. So, yeah.
Yeah, you. Excuse me. In one of your videos, you talk about being university and some of the things that you did to kind of pass tests and things like that. How um, very, very. It seems very inviting. You also talk at one of them about how being in Sao Paulo, how you got held up, and when you were young there in Slovenia, you saw somebody stealing things in the open, and I love these kind of open kind of conversations that you have, Urska. It's very very refreshing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hope my friend doesn't watch it because I was talking about him. He stole a TV from the store and he had an employee that helped him get the TV in his van. That
Right,
was that was the most brilliant thing I've ever saw, honestly.
inside job. Had no mask on or anything.
Nothing. He walked in like he owned the place.
Right.
Nothing. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. And yeah, I could see that happening here too, actually. It's just that you just work from the inside. Yeah,
You
you
guys
just
do
pay.
you guys have a big shoplifting problem now?
We do actually. It's funny you mentioned that. I just saw that, especially with the homeless problem that's here, or
Mm.
house deprived, or whatever their term is. But we have a there's a big shop. If it's under like $900 or something that they shoplift, they can't criminally prosecute them. So there's huge problem in the cities with shoplifting. I thought I read a statistic recently as like billions of dollars of a problem. By the way, is it an issue there?
It's kind of like low key, to be completely honest with you. There's not a lot of shoplifting going on officially, but they don't even call the police here either, unless it's something big. So it's not
Right.
right. Yeah, it's not. It is a problem. I mean, it's always been a problem. So there is no uprising shoplifting. Actually, my neighbor, gosh, I'm not gonna mention her name. She shoplifts a lot.
Really?
Yeah, I just met her very recently. She shoplifts a lot. She's stealing beefsteaks from a grocery and selling it to her grandma.
That's quite a
Yeah.
racket. That's very so she's putting them inside her clothes and she's walking out with them and then she's dropping
Probably.
the
Probably.
and
I mean,
drop.
when I was a teenager, I stole Skittles.
Me
I
too.
stole Skittles all the
Yeah,
time, and
yeah,
I never got caught. So, but
right.
I feel like those are little um, white offenses, I think,
Mm,
misdemeanor. The issue is that it can escalate pretty rapidly because people get addicted to that as well. And then you want to steal something bigger. And where does it stop? You
where
can
does it
have a
stop?
felony after a while.
Absolutely. I liked
Yeah.
your discussion with the sex worker.
hmm
That was really good. And when you get a guest like that, what kind of preparation do you do?
Well, I don't usually get a guest unless I know that this is a topic that I really want to talk about. So what I will do is
Mm,
I listen to podcasts all the time. Every day I like to listen to YouTube, different podcasts, different, if there is a book I read and I'm really interested in that topic, then I'll go online and I'll look for a guest, and I already have my opinion about the topic. And then I check out their channel, I do my little research, and it's really easy when you're interested in the topic that they talk about. It's it, Preparation is a luxury, and you are so interested, and it's easy to do it. It's easy to do it. I think a lot of podcasters do a big mistake of inviting people on their podcast that they're not even interested in, and then they talk about, so where were you born, so what's your I don't know, like, it's boring, right? No
tell me
one
about your
really
book.
wants to hear that. Tell me
Yeah.
about your book. Yeah, well,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know maybe ask something that people are going to be interested in just as much as you are, because I feel like authenticity beats perfection any day now
Mhm.
online. And when you have a topic that you have a really genuine connection and discussion about, it shows, it speaks volumes, and people can feel it.
Yeah, I think I heard a number recently, 4 million podcasts. I may have that wrong, but a lot of times when I'm doing preparation, I see previous, podcasts that are on, and so often, I just the podcasters, it's just kind of lazy, Urska.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
introduce yourself. I mean, that's the laziest thing possible. I mean, you, I just like you do a great job. You just start the interview with a question. Let's just make this a genuine conversation, like you say. You just said, being authentic is where it should be, and it's frustrating. And generally speaking, those podcasts don't really last that long because um, the followership doesn't see it. Where
yeah.
did you develop your style?
I have no idea. I just came on camera the way I am.
Mm,
And I mean, I am who I am, right? So it's kind of like, I've never actually took a lot of it never took a lot of effort to develop a brand of a sort, or to have a certain persona in front of a camera. I feel like being in front of a camera is hard enough. Now imagine you have to be someone and change your personality every time you interview someone. That wouldn't work out very well, at least not long term. So, if anyone is wondering about starting out a podcast, I would say, this is so corny, but just be yourself, and be yourself continuously, and people will come. People like you will come, basically, because
yeah.
you are your listener, right? Someone like me is someone who would listen to a podcast that I have right now because I'm interested in that. And it's going to be easier, and you're going to be developing your audience organically, and it's going to be just simple and a lot faster.
Yeah. When I was listening to you, I was very I was you'd ask a question and you'd listen. It's just that simple. I mean, how many podcasts you see these people talking over each other? And then you'd ask a question, and then I'd think, "Ah, that's a great question. Let's listen to this answer." I mean, so when when I talk to people, I beg your pardon. When I talk to people like yourself or others, I like to think that I'm asking questions that the listener would be interested in. I mean, that I
Yeah.
do it for myself. Hopefully, people will have interest in it. I don't really. We talked about discipline. We'll talk a little bit about it now, but that's kind of the string that I bring together. But like yourself, also you talked about. I love your your take on narcissism. How I own a tech company. We do a lot of technical work, and when I'm doing sales and I'm selling to a narcissist, I love it. I love it because
Mm.
they have to look good. So I have to make this sale, make them look good, and it's done. And you say the same thing. You say, I know what to deal with. I know how to work with them because I know what their motivation is.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why a lot of times narcissists are also victims of scammers, because a
Mm,
narcissist is never wrong. If he
right.
goes into a venture, it's a good venture and it's a good business decisions because it's his decision. That's why, so there are narcissists are very great victims of a lot of scammers, unfortunately.
Interesting.
Yeah, because
Interesting.
if it suits them, the narcissist is going to love it. And no matter where the reality is, and usually they're not in reality at all. So, yeah, it's a post-traumatic stress disorder.
Do you come into life? Do you have a lot of people that you know that are narcissist?
I know one person. Of course, they would have to be clinically diagnosed, but you can kind of tell, at least have narcissistic tendencies. I know one
Tendencies.
person, yeah. It's a guy, by the way. Actually, we used to date for a little while before I noticed all the signs, and I was like, "Whoa, let's not."
Red flags were there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
It's good that you can a narcissist ever change?
No, no, they can
Really?
modify their behavior, but I do not think they can change. I would go as far as saying narcissists are the type of people who do not really love their children. And I know that's a very brave statement, but I would say I believe that is the case based on the research that I did, and I did a lot of research.
I loved your conversation about Mexican cartels. What gave you an interest in that area? That was fascinating.
Yeah, I think I was actually watching an episode on the narco culture. Narco culture is the
Uh,
culture of, of people in these cartels. Yeah, and then I was extremely lucky to have on the chief deputy, Matthew. And yeah, that's the episode I was really excited about. Yeah.
you did a great job there, and he was excellent. And again, Urska, you just do a great job of listening. It's I have to keep stressing that because so often, I'm sure you see in podcasts, they're talking over each other.
Yeah.
The idea of when somebody does this, when somebody asks a question, they go, mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. When they're doing that, they're not listening. There's a big difference between listening and waiting to speak.
I feel like a lot of people just use the time when the person is talking to figure out what they're gonna say after, right? So it's a monologue with pauses in between. You're not gonna get anywhere like that. And now I know that sometimes when I was listening to a person talk and they talked about something that I didn't know and I was very interested in, I had a question that wasn't too appropriate for that point in time. And I felt myself thinking, okay, do I ask this? Will I not ask it? And I was like, okay, I'm going to ask it. And that's, for example, that's when I had Veronica, the high end escort, on my podcast. And she was talking
Yes.
about how she was charging these men and how they were paying her. And I was like, okay, just how much? I know it's not appropriate
Right.
to say, but how much? And she was like $25,000 per date. And I was like, whoa. Because people are wondering that as well.
Absolutely. It's a great
Yeah.
question.
Mm.
And what she said about the police, how the police treated her the worst.
Yeah, she was talking about that. She said that she said the situation was actually reversed from what she had in her college. because in college years when dating, she said the guys only wanted sex, and then that would be it for her, and she wanted more. And she said that when it comes to escorting, she was the one who just wanted to be over with, and the guys were like, hey, do you love me? Do you care for me at all? So she said that the clients were wonderful and sweet, and the police were the ones who were treating these sex workers the worst. Yeah. So that was very insightful.
It's eye-opening. Yeah.
Yeah. You know
Yeah,
what? And I
absolutely.
also learned that the more high end the escort is, the less sex is involved and the more emotional the connection is. Right. So if you have a person who's just standing on a corner, it's probably going to be very transactional. But as the more high end you go, of course, the more you're going to pay, but the more of a therapeutic relationship is going to be.
I had an opportunity at one point. I was in Las Vegas that you mentioned, and I was sitting, in a bar with some friends, and a woman comes up to us, and you could just certainly tell, and we just got to talking, and she was saying that there's very little sex. She does actually a lot of listening,
Hmm.
because just like it's fascinating. This is a very attractive woman, and perhaps a bit overdressed, but it's very, very fascinating what happens there. The episode on ayahuasca was tremendous. Why an interest there?
I actually plan on booking a trip to Peru to do an ayahuasca trip. And as I was looking to book it, I was like, hey, why don't I do an episode on that? So that was a really good one.
It was great. Yeah, he talked about how not all the experiences are, I don't want to say positive or negative, but they're not euphoric, and there's some can you kind of get into some depths, and they're not. Everybody has this vision that you see, you see light, and you see the best side, but it can sometimes not be that way. That's my biggest takeaway.
It's not a fun experience. No,
Right.
it's not a party thing. And I
Right.
was really impressed. I was very shocked at how much people's life changed. Some people start hanging out with certain people because they don't really suit them. Some people stop eating certain food. I figured the whole psychedelic experience, it's kind of like intuition on steroids. So your body knows something and it tells you you should do this, you should do that, and then you listen to it, right? Because if you want to consciously now when you're not on psychedelics, if you want to consciously figure out which foods do not suit your body, you're going to have one hell of a job to do. You're going to have to write down everything, you're probably going to have to journal. When it comes to psychedelics, well, maybe one trip is going to tell you that, and then you have certain people in your life that you're not really too sure about, and you need to talk to them a lot. You need to figure out yourself, if they are someone who you should keep in your life. You have a psychedelic trip. During that one trip you can figure that out. So there's a lot of things that can be figured out with these psychedelic trips. Yeah, childhood trauma and everything, man, everything. And I figured, I always ask these people that work with psychedelics, how much therapy would someone need to have the same effect as one psychedelic trip? Yeah, and I always thought, okay, so 12 years of more of traditional psychotherapy equates to one psychedelic trip. But not
Wow.
necessarily. They told me that not even that, because psychedelics give you the depth that therapy cannot possibly give you ever. So you cannot even compare that with psychedelics.
Your frankness and your direct response to things is so refreshing, Urska, and I don't see it in a lot of people. Like you just mentioned food. You had one particular you talk about it one time where you're having eczema and you're having some skin issues. And so you just decided to kind of journal all the food you ate for a while until you eventually eliminated the one that was doing it. It's so logical, and so many people just don't do that. They complain about being bloated, or and they're not journaling what they're eating, and they're not. It's just such a rational logic approach to things. I just get the feeling you do that in kind of all the aspects of your life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's the hardest one because that takes a lot of effort.
Mm,
Writing down everything you eat all the time, nobody really wants to do that, right? But it's,
right.
it is the only way. It's the only way. Unfortunately, a lot of times The only way to go about it is the hardest one. So, and I've came to conclusion that that is the case most of the time, and I'm okay with that now.
Hmm. So, I lost a lot of weight. I started my business in the 90s, and I gained a lot of weight. I wasn't paying attention to myself. It's like, I wasn't writing the food I was eating. I was just eating away and not exercising. And before you know it, I was too heavy. And the doctor said to me, my daughter was born. You're not going to see her graduate if you don't, straighten up. So that's my kind of come to Jesus moment. And, I lost about 140 pounds over a year and a half. And people always ask me, how did I do it? You know, obesity, weight is a big issue here in the States, and everybody wants a kind of quick answer, and
Mhm.
there's none. So I always just say discipline. I got focused and I got disciplined, and that's the way I did it. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life.
Well, as far as working out goes, this used to be a fitness channel because I had certain fitness challenges that I was doing, and I had certain goals in mind. I wanted to do 102 push-ups in a row, which I did. I
Whoa.
wanted to. Whoa, yeah. So that took a fair bit of discipline.
Yes.
I did. I recently did 30 pull-ups in a row, so that was
Whoa.
hard. I did a 10-minute plank. That was hell. And I did some interval workouts and then clapping push-ups. So all these things required a lot of discipline. And
Yeah.
I discipline myself every day to work out, and my workouts are usually quite brutal. I figured, and a lot of times people ask me, why do you work out so hard? Why do you, are you crazy? Why do you wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning and go for a run? Now, I do not want to do these things. Otherwise, it wouldn't be discipline. I'm not crazy. I don't enjoy waking up in early in the morning and going for a run. Nobody enjoys that. I hate it. I hate it while I'm doing it, right? And I hate everything about it. But here's where discipline comes in, because I like to have a rational approach to discipline. There is a goal that I need to achieve. What will happen if I do not achieve this goal? This, and that. Now, those are negatives. I do not want that. The only way to achieve the goal is to be disciplined and to do certain practices over and over again. So there's only one way to go, and that's be disciplined. And I think it's a relief to know that this is the only thing you can do to achieve this goal, because then you have no other choice. So I look at it very practically. Discipline is something that I just need to do because there's no alternative. If for example, so if you want to start a business, if you want to have a successful podcast, there's no way of getting that without working, putting in effort, putting in time, and being disciplined. You can choose to not be disciplined, but then you won't have a successful podcast. So when you look at it in that way, it's simple. It's your only option. So you take it. I feel like the worst thing ever for people is to have multiple options, right? Because when you have multiple options, you become confused, you become anxious, you're not sure if you're doing the right thing. When there's only one option, that's why prison was very liberating for a lot of people, because you have everything scheduled. All your life is, it's pretty much planned out, right? You have a death sentence. Every day you know what you're going to be doing. So for a lot of them, it's actually a relief.
You're very, very practical. It's fascinating. When I work out like yourself, I can't stand doing, getting up to it. I can't stand doing it. But when I'm done, I get such a relief. Okay, that's it. Whatever happens for the rest of this day is not going to be as tough as me just doing that right there. And so hopefully. And and it's such a great way of doing it. And your system of thinking, everything is very kind of practical and laid out like that. And it's interesting that discipline kind of wraps around that. It's a fascinating take. Had you always considered yourself disciplined?
Oh, absolutely not. When I was playing video games, that was very disciplined.
Ah.
That wasn't discipline. But I don't know where discipline came in. Maybe it's I don't know. I don't know. I just came to a realization that if I want to achieve this, then Discipline is going to have to be a part of it.
Yeah.
If not, then not. And it's your choice. You can have it or you cannot have it, right? And if you don't want to have it, fair enough. Fair enough. There's benefits to that. You may not be where you want to be. You may be broke, you may be struggling or be overweight, but you don't have to work out. So
Mm.
there's your benefit. You can just weight the cost of the benefit and then realize what means more to you. And when you have your values in line, I feel like discipline goes without saying, and it's easy.
Sometimes I get pushback, and people say, "Well, you don't need discipline. You need compassion, and uh, you know, um, you need more of a open mind." And I don't profess to be the king of discipline. By the way, there's plenty of areas where I lack discipline. But I guess my point is that even if compassion is your primary target or your primary motive, don't you need a level of self-discipline to do that? I just kind of think there's some level of discipline in anything that you need to do, some level at least.
Yeah, besides, how are you going to feel about yourself if you know you're not disciplined?
Mm,
I highly doubt there's a lot of people out there who are going to feel good about themselves if you know your day is not structured in any way. If you just wake up at 11 a.m. and then you go for a walk or you watch television all day, you're not gonna feel good about yourself, and your life, it's not gonna be good. It is not like
mm,
you're just not
mm.
gonna be happy. I feel like you are happy when there's something you're struggling with, when there's a goal that you're struggling towards. I feel like this is where you're most happy because that's just humans. We are complicated, man. We're very complicated creatures.
It's very interesting. Do you celebrate your goals when you reach them?
Actually, I do not. And I'm not sure why, but I feel like when the goal is reached, I'm like, oh, well, that's pretty much it. And but maybe I should. I just so much enjoy the most interesting part of the start to finish journey is right before I'm about to achieve the goal, is seeing everything I did so far and how successful I was, and thinking, wow, this is actually realizing, this is coming to a realization. This is the most interesting part. Then the whole achieving the goal, then I just, it's just off to the next one.
So, Urska, you did 100 push-ups and you didn't high five anyone. You just said, "Okay, now I'm going to do the 10-minute plank." You
Exactly.
didn't.
Exactly. And it's on my Instagram. Okay, it's a video because
Okay,
if
okay,
there's
yeah,
no video, it didn't happen, right? So I
okay.
videoed. I made a video. Yeah.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I need to celebrate, the victories, the goals a little bit.
That's good.
You should, because then there's kind of a carrot at the end. And do you often share goals with others? Or you're just doing them yourself?
I like to share my goals with others because then it holds me accountable.
Mm.
So if I say, okay, so by this month I'm gonna finish reading a book or I'm gonna finish studying that, then everyone knows it, and then I know at the end of the month everybody's gonna ask me, hey, so when you said you were gonna do that, how's that working for you? And I'm just not going to be able to live with myself if I have to tell everybody, and then I'm going to have to give them a rational reason, which I know is just a real rationalization on my part. So I know that, it adds a certain pressure to the goal, right? So it helps you achieve it because, now people are going to start asking about it, like, what's going on with this project of yours?
Wow, so you do use accountability.
For selfish
Very
reasons,
interesting.
yes.
Yeah, for selfish reasons, yeah. Because then they can't stick it in your face saying, yeah, because they're gonna try to say you're not achieving your goals.
And that as well, yeah. Yeah, you have to,
It's
like,
motivation.
they remind you
Yeah.
about the fact that you didn't achieve that. And then if you do that a couple of times, then basically they remind you that you're not doing something right. You're just not achieving what you've wanted to achieve, right? So it helps you. Yeah, it helps you.
Hmm. Urska Rubin, what motivates you?
What motivates me at this very moment? I am a full-time option trader and I've been doing this my whole life. So doing that, it's not really serving the community in any way. I started to think about that recently. I started thinking, okay, how can I serve the community finally? Because I need to. It's like an inner need of every person. And I figured, wow, a podcast. So, what motivates me is having people who like to listen to me, who enjoy the videos, who are educated by them. And that's what motivates me currently. Having people who I can help if they have maybe some mental issue, or maybe they need to feel better, or maybe they're lonely or something, or just serving the society. That's what motivates me at the moment.
That's noble. And did this realization or this motivation happen and then the podcast happened, or did the reverse happen where you're doing the podcast and it's fulfilling this?
It was very much reversed. The reason why I started
Mm.
podcast was because I was bored and I have no life. So I started it. And then I was like, wow, this is actually really working out well for me. Maybe I can serve the community that way. So now, yeah, that's how it came about.
It's interesting you say that because there was somebody here in the States who had a show when I was younger, and he would interview people in just very ballerinas, chefs, and people that I would normally have no interest in, and I just found myself compelled to the conversation. And later, about a year, and I've done this for about a year and a half now. You're number 177th that I've interviewed, or
Whoa.
just I don't even like to say interview, by the way, because it makes it so one-sided. I like to say just have a conversation with, but I just like to think that I have interest in so many different people and their journeys and their loves and passions that hopefully others would. And in a way that serves the community like yourself. That's very interesting. I guess I've kind of doing that inadvertently. Uh, how do you measure success?
Well, there's how do I measure success? In different areas. So with the podcast, I measure success by numbers, because that's
Hmm.
just how I measure. That's how you do it, by views, by subscribers. Then when it comes to working out, I measure success by how I'm feeling. I don't
Hmm.
necessarily measure success by how many push ups I can do, how much time I can run, but how do I feel after a workout? Because when you do a good workout, you're euphoric. So that's success in my book. Even if I did a lot less than the other day, well, that's it for me today. That's what my body can do, and I'm successful. When it comes to relationships, how do I measure success? Well, how do I feel? How did this person make me feel? Are we doing a good thing? Because when there's something wrong in a relationship, you usually know. In the back of your mind, you know. Even me, I'm not very intelligent, like a socially intelligent person. I'm not emotionally intelligent, and even I know. So it's very out there. Like it's very clear to a human being. So a lot of things I measure subconsciously. How am I feeling about this? What's my intuition telling me? Is there something that's not on point? And then when it comes to other things, well, numbers like podcast.
The title of your podcast, Captainese. I never really heard the origin of that. Why did you come up with that name?
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to be Captain Jack. That would be pretty cool, right? That would be cool. But it was taken. It was taken. So
It's,
I figured, okay, Captainese it is then. It is not, I don't think it is spelled correctly. I highly doubt. But it is, Captainese it is what it is. Too many people know me by that name now, so I'm not going to change it.
and the lion behind you.
And the lion was here before I started the podcast, actually.
That's
And
it.
in front of the lion is my table. So I looked at it and I was like, if I can just have one lighting here, then that would be my studio. And there it is.
Absolute pleasure talking to you today, Urska. Thank you so much. I was very excited when you accepted this. I love what you're doing. I hope you continue. Maybe even one day we get to have a cup of coffee together. But thank you so much for your time. How can we get in touch with you? How can people get to the podcast?
Oh, Captainese on every single platform. So YouTube, Spotify, and that's spelled Captainese. I always look dumb when I have to spell it. But
No, no,
where are you
no.
located, by the way?
I'm outside of New York. But I'm currently in the Denver area, and in the summer I spend time in the winter I spend time in Tampa in the Florida area. So I kind of move
Oh,
around.
well, those are all the
Yeah.
places that I plan on visiting. When I am there, I'm gonna invite you to a steakhouse because that's what I do. By the way, are you a vegetarian?
No,
Awesome.
no,
I'm
no,
gonna
no.
invite you to a steakhouse because that's what I do with like all the people that came to my podcast. I tell them, look, I owe you a steak. So when I'm there, I'm gonna hit you up and we can go.
Well, so when you were in New York City, did you go to steakhouses?
I did. I did. I do not remember what the name was. It was a
Uh,
very good steakhouse. It was close to the McKitten Hotel where they have the Sleep No More show. It was a very good one. I'm gonna take you to that one. Although I
Maybe
do not know the
Luger.
name anymore. So
Yeah, I like steaks, and I know like there's 2 or 3 great steakhouses here in Denver and New York. There's Luger's, there's many, and of course Texas is filled with them. Very
oh yeah,
good, but I will take you up on that. I will take you up on that.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. I look forward to meeting you in person, and you be well.
Thank you so much for having me on. You do an amazing job. I can tell you've
Yeah,
been doing it for quite a while. You're a very
yeah.
seasoned person
Ah,
on camera, and you're
that's it.
doing an amazing job as well. I will get to your level one day. I will. I will.
Yeah.
Trust me, I will. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on, man.
Thank you so much. You be well. I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.
Alrighty.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with 1 or 2 of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.